She looked me in the eye and said she missed us. But the truth was, there was no us anymore. Not since the day she walked out without looking back, leaving me with an empty wallet and a colder bed. Now she was sitting across from me, pretending to be curious, pretending to care, but I didn't need revenge. I just wanted her to see what she gave up. And when I stood up to leave, I didn't take her hand. I took back my power. I remember the sound of the ceiling fan more clearly than her voice that day. It was slow, rhythmic, almost mocking, like time itself was dragging its feet while I sat there, trying to hold my life together. I was broke. Not tight on money, broke. I was skip meals to pay rent, broke. My startup had drained the last of my savings, clients weren't coming through, and even my part-time gig at the bookstore barely covered essentials. But I still had her, or at least I thought I did. We'd been together for 3 years by then, long enough that I knew all her favorite ways to fall asleep, all her nervous tics when she was lying, and the exact tone she used when something was wrong, but she wouldn't admit it. She used that tone more often lately. I kept telling myself she was just stressed too, that watching me spiral into financial chaos must be difficult for someone who liked stability, nice things, future plans. I had dreams, a business idea that had obsessed me for years. She said she believed in it. She used to sit across the table, laptop open, helping me find clients, mocking up logos, researching markets. That felt like another life. Now the table was mostly empty. She stayed on her phone while I ate my instant noodles. She stopped asking how things were going, stopped pretending to care. The warmth faded so slowly I didn't notice how cold it had become until she stopped kissing me goodbye. But I still had hope, even then. Even with the electricity bill overdue and my landlord texting daily, I believed things would turn around. I had one lead, a company interested in what I was building, a real chance. I worked 16-hour days trying to land them, ignoring the aching silence growing between us. I still remember how excited I was when they finally said yes. It wasn't a big contract, but it was the lifeline I needed. I rushed home that day, eager to share the news. I thought maybe this would be the moment things changed. Not just financially, but between us too. That I'd finally prove I wasn't just dreaming, that I was building something real. She wasn't home, just a note. 4 lines, neat handwriting, apologetic tone. Said she couldn't do this anymore. Said I needed someone who wouldn't hold me back. Said she was sorry. She wasn't. And if she was, she wouldn't have moved out that same night. She wouldn't have blocked my number. She wouldn't have disappeared from my life so quickly. It felt like she'd rehearsed it. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat on the floor, rereading that note until my eyes burned. Then I crumpled it and threw it into the trash. I slept on the couch that night because I couldn't bear to see the empty side of the bed. The next morning, I went back to work. The morning after she left was quiet. Not peaceful, empty. There's a difference, and you only notice it when the silence isn't a break, but a consequence. I stood in the kitchen, staring at 2 chipped mugs. Hers was still in the sink. Lipstick faded on the rim. I didn't wash it. I didn't have the time anyway. The contract I had just landed was small, but it was a start. I dove into it like it was the only thing keeping me alive. And maybe in a way, it was. I worked until my body gave out each night, barely sleeping, barely eating. There was a fire in me now, not the excited kind, not the hopeful kind, a quiet, controlled flame that only burns when you've been humiliated, discarded, underestimated. I stopped checking my phone for her texts after the 2nd week. There were none. No apology, no explanation. She had erased me like I was a phase she regretted. I stopped letting myself imagine her regretting it. That only distracted me. She made her decision. I was done trying to understand it. But the questions lingered. Had she ever really believed in me? Or was she just betting on the version of me that might succeed? Was she in love with the man I was, or the man I might become? That doubt can eat you alive if you let it. I didn't. I channeled every ounce of that confusion into my business. My world shrank. Just the project, my laptop, and the four walls of my apartment. I missed meals. I missed birthdays. I missed sleep. I didn't miss her. Not consciously. 3 months in, I had 4 new clients. Small businesses, referrals from the first one I landed. I wasn't rich, not even close, but I could afford groceries without anxiety attacks. I could pay rent without begging for an extension. It was the beginning of something. My work was finally speaking for itself. Still, there was no one to celebrate with. I didn't bother calling friends. I wasn't in the mood for small talk or pity. Everyone knew she left. No one asked why, but one person did call. My mom. She'd always believed in me, even when she didn't understand what I was doing. She never said, "I told you so," even though she could have. She just asked if I was eating, and I lied. That conversation gave me just enough strength to keep going. Not just for revenge, but because I had no other option. Success was my only path forward. I had no fallback, no cushion, no one to catch me if I slipped again. All I had was the memory of being left at my lowest, and a stubborn refusal to stay there. 6 months after she left, I signed my first 5-figure deal. A regional brand wanted my services exclusively. I still remember the way my hand shook signing that contract. That night, I bought myself a decent dinner. Sat alone, candle on the table, steak instead of noodles. I toasted to no one. She never saw that version of me. Not yet. Time has a strange way of rewarding the people who wait with grit instead of tears. By the 1-year mark, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. The business had a name people started recognizing. My apartment was nicer, not luxurious, but respectable. My bank account had padding. For the first time in years, I stopped flinching at every notification from my banking app. I'd started working with a mentor by then, someone who'd scaled their own company from a bedroom office to a 7-figure machine. He didn't care about my past. He saw my ideas and how ruthlessly I executed them. I didn't tell him about her. It wasn't relevant, not professionally anyway, but personally, she never left. Not really. Her absence stayed with me like smoke on old clothes, subtle, lingering, hard to scrub out. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. I just hadn't processed her. That made her dangerous. Still, I kept my head down. Another 6 months passed. My client list tripled. I hired 2 freelancers. I even spoke at a local business meetup. People asked for my card now. They looked me in the eye differently. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was someone. I had done it. And that's when it happened. A DM. From her. Simple. Casual. Innocuous. Like nothing had ever happened. "Hey, long time. How've you been?" I stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Not reading, just processing. Her profile picture was the same. She looked happy. Maybe thinner. Maybe not. I couldn't tell if I felt anything, but the pit in my stomach returned. A shadow of the one I had felt the day she left. Didn't reply right away. I scrolled through her feed. She had moved cities, started a blog about minimalism, posted filtered selfies with poetic captions. But beneath all the polish, I noticed something. There wasn't anyone in her life now. No tagged photos, no partners, no real friends commenting on her updates. It was just her, trying to look like she didn't care who was watching. But I was watching. I replied 2 days later. "Been busy. You?" Short, safe. Enough to see what she wanted. She wrote back instantly, like she'd been waiting. "I've been thinking about you lately. You crossed my mind." I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I didn't even blink. I just stared at those words and let them echo. Thinking about you was a phrase that meant nothing and everything. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask what she thought I'd become. But instead, I let her talk. Over the next few days, we messaged casually. She was polite, nostalgic, dropped hints about the good old days, the long talks we used to have, how she missed our connection. I said little, just enough to keep her speaking. I wasn't interested in love. I was interested in truth. And she was handing it over, one breadcrumb at a time. She didn't ask how I was financially. She didn't ask about the business. She didn't even ask if I was seeing anyone. But she did ask to meet. Would love to grab coffee sometime. If you're around. I said yes. Not for closure. For clarity. The day we were supposed to meet, I woke up before my alarm. It had been years since I'd seen her face in person, and yet I could picture it as clearly as if she'd never left. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel excited. I felt ready. The kind of readiness that comes after building a new life on the ruins of the old one. I picked the location carefully, a quiet cafe on the top floor of a boutique hotel, not too flashy, but elegant. It overlooked the city, a city I had earned the right to enjoy from above. I arrived 15 minutes early, chose the seat facing the window, and waited. She walked in, wearing the same perfume she used to. I smelled it before I saw her. She spotted me right away, smiled, and made her way over like it hadn't been 2 years since she walked out on me. She looked familiar, but smaller somehow. Not physically, just diminished, like someone who was trying to remember who they were supposed to be. "Hey," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Hey," I returned. My voice was even. I didn't offer a hug. Neither did she. We made small talk, weather, traffic. She asked about the city. I asked about her blog. It was shallow, but not cold. I let her fill the silence, and she did nervously. I could tell she hadn't planned what to say after hello. Then came the turn. "I've thought about that day," she said quietly, stirring her coffee, though it didn't need stirring. "The day I left, I waited. She didn't look at me. I thought I was doing the right thing," she continued. "I didn't know how to handle watching you fall apart. It scared me." That was the first honest thing she'd said since she arrived. "It wasn't about not loving you," she added. "It was about not knowing how to stay." I nodded slowly. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer her a way out of the discomfort. She finally looked up. "But I see now what you've become. And I don't know, I guess part of me wonders if we could reconnect." There it was, the real reason, wrapped in vulnerability, softened by guilt, but it was there, a seed of possibility she hoped to plant in the same soil she once abandoned. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. The sun had just started to set, golden lights spilling over the skyline like a reward for patience. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" I said finally. "It wasn't the money, it wasn't the stress. It was coming home every day, hoping you'd still be there." She blinked, said nothing. "I don't hate you," I continued. "I needed what happened. It taught me more about myself than any success ever could." She reached across the table, hesitant. "I'm not asking to go back, just maybe start fresh." I looked at her hand, then back at her eyes, and I smiled. Not a cruel smile, not vengeful, just one of peace. "I've already started fresh," I said, "and this chapter, it doesn't have you in it." Her hand slowly withdrew. We finished our drinks in silence. When we stood up, she hugged me. I let her. Then I watched her walk away, down the escalator, disappearing into the city, and I felt nothing but calm. It's strange how easily someone can become a stranger again. As I watched her disappear through the glass elevator, I realized something I hadn't been able to accept for a Long time, she had been a chapter, not the story. And that chapter had ended the moment she left. Not when she messaged me, not when she walked into that cafe. The real ending was the night I came home to an empty apartment and a folded note that told me everything I needed to know. Walking out of that cafe felt like stepping into a world where I didn't have to carry her memory anymore. Not as a wound, not even as a lesson, just as something that happened. And that freedom felt better than any revenge I could have planned. Still, I won't lie. The days that followed felt a bit hollow at first. There's a kind of release that comes after a confrontation like that. You expect to feel triumphant, maybe even euphoric. But what I felt was silence. Clean silence, but silence all the same. It's like your body forgets the fight is over, and it keeps bracing for impact that never comes. I went back to work, but with a different energy now. I wasn't proving anything anymore. Not to her. Not to the people who doubted me. Not even to myself. I had already proven it. Now I was just living it. And living it looked good on me. I expanded the team, brought in 2 full-time hires. I upgraded our office space. I started sleeping more than 5 hours a night. I even started seeing someone new, slowly, carefully. She didn't remind me of my past, and maybe that's why I liked her. But here's the part I didn't expect. A few weeks after our cafe meeting, she reached out again. This time, the message was longer, more emotional. She said she was sorry, said she replayed our conversation 100 times, that she hadn't realized how much she hurt me, that she never stopped caring, even if she didn't show it when it mattered. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. And maybe that was the point. The closure I thought I needed from her had come from within. Not because she apologized, not because I forgave her out loud, but because I saw her again, not the memory of her, not the idea of who she might have been, but the actual her. And in seeing her clearly, I saw myself clearly too. I wasn't the man she left behind anymore. I was the man who built a life without her. And that truth, that was worth more than any revenge I could have planned. It was worth everything. I didn't block her. That would have been petty. She could watch me grow, watch me win, watch me live a life she'd chosen to step away from. I wasn't doing it for her, but I wasn't hiding it from her either. There was a quiet power in that, letting someone witness the life they abandoned without giving them a way back in. The funny thing about success is how quickly it redefines the way people look at you. Not just strangers, but old friends, distant relatives, people who once responded with indifference, now reacted with awe. I started getting invitations to speak at panels, to mentor young entrepreneurs, to reconnect with folks who hadn't messaged me since the days I couldn't afford lunch. She wasn't the only one, but her absence had left the deepest imprint. Her walking away had branded something into me that I didn't recognize at first. A need for certainty. I no longer tolerated people whose loyalty had conditions. I didn't care how charming they were or how much history we had. If they didn't show up when I was down, they wouldn't get access when I was up. That principle shaped not just my personal life, but my business too. I became deliberate about the clients I worked with, the team I was building, and the image I projected. Authenticity wasn't a slogan, it was a shield, and I wore it like armor. She messaged again, not to apologize this time, but to ask if we could catch up. I stared at the screen for a long while, not out of indecision, but disbelief. How many ways could someone say they wanted back in without ever saying, I was wrong? I didn't answer. Instead, I archived the conversation and kept walking. I had a meeting to get to, a partnership proposal with a major brand. The kind of deal that would have sounded like fantasy 2 years ago when I was sleeping on a spring-poked couch and rationing instant noodles. The meeting went well. I signed the deal. I left the building feeling 10 feet tall, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. I was building an empire on the ashes of every moment I was told I wasn't enough, and no one could take that from me. I took myself out to dinner that night, alone again, but not lonely. There's a difference. Alone means you chose solitude. Lonely means solitude chose you. And I wasn't being chosen anymore. I was doing the choosing. I raised my glass, not in celebration, but in recognition. Of every night I didn't give up. Of every silent meal I pushed through. Of every moment I told myself, just keep going. And then I toasted to her. Not with anger, not with spite, just with closure. She had her chance. She gave it up. And I never needed it back. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a shift, not just in my career or daily life, but in how I carried myself. There was a stillness in me, a steadiness that came from knowing I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. Not her, not the people who vanished when I was struggling, not the ones trying to reappear now that I was thriving. When she reached out again, I wasn't surprised. This time, it was different, longer, more emotional. She spoke about dreams, about what we could have had, about regret. She said she'd been following my journey, that she was proud, that she missed us. But there was no us. There hadn't been for a long time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because here's the thing, no one tells you about revenge. The most satisfying kind isn't loud. It's not about dramatic confrontations or public victories. It's the quiet, undeniable truth of your own growth. It's seeing someone finally recognize your value when you've already stopped needing their recognition. I had changed. I wasn't just the guy who got left. I wasn't the guy scraping by, hoping someone would believe in him. I was the man who believed in himself when no one else did. That belief had built a company, a new circle of friends, and a version of myself I respected. There was a time I might have played along, let her back in just far enough to see what she missed, then shut the door. But that would have meant inviting old energy into a new life, and I had worked too damn hard to build this peace. I wasn't about to jeopardize it for nostalgia wrapped in guilt. I didn't hate her. That was the hardest part, to admit. I just didn't need her. There's a freedom in that realization, pure and absolute. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with fireworks or triumphant music. It arrives like a sunrise after a long night, slow, steady, and inevitable. One evening, I scrolled back through our old messages, not to relive them, just to remember, to acknowledge how far I'd come. Then I deleted the thread, not in anger, just finality. After that, her name never showed up again, and I never looked back, because the man she left behind was gone, and the man I became, he never needed her to begin with. After deleting her messages, I sat in silence for a long time. Not the kind of silence that demands distraction, but the kind that feels earned. It was the same room where I had once stared at her goodbye note, numb and hollow. But this time, it was different. The same four walls, the same floor, but the man sitting there wasn't the same. I didn't mark the moment with a post. I didn't tell anyone. There was no announcement, no need for validation. The closure didn't need an audience. That was something I'd come to understand about real healing. It happens in private. The world around me didn't pause, of course. Business was booming. My schedule filled fast. I was consulting now, even speaking at entrepreneurship events. People asked me about failure, about perseverance, about vision. They wanted the bullet points, the lessons. But the real turning point, That didn't fit neatly in a slide deck. It wasn't a strategy, it was a decision. The day I decided to stop proving myself to people who had already made their judgment, my personal life grew healthier too. The woman I was seeing, let's call her Mia, was different. She didn't ask about my past right away. She didn't seem interested in what I owned or what I'd built. She asked how I slept, what kind of books I liked, whether I preferred quiet mornings or late nights. She didn't want to fix me. She didn't want to be impressed. She wanted to understand me. It was disarming at first. I was so used to being seen as a project or a stepping stone that I almost missed what it felt like to be seen as human. We took things slow. I didn't rush into defining anything. And when I told her, months later, about how someone I once loved walked away at my lowest, she didn't pity me. She just said, "You're not there anymore. That's the only part that matters." She was right. Still, every now and then, I'd get reminders. People from the past would reappear in small, indirect ways. Mutual friends reconnecting, tagged photos, invitations to reunions, whispers that she still brought up my name in conversations, that she asked how I was, but she never messaged again, and I never reached out, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood what that chapter was: a necessary loss. The kind that prunes your life like fire to a forest. Painful, yes, but in the aftermath, everything grows stronger, cleaner, wiser. I wasn't building a life to spite her. I was building a life that didn't need her shadow in it at all. And that distinction, that's what made it real. The first time I saw her in person again after that cafe meeting wasn't planned. It had been over a year since our quiet goodbye. I was speaking at a business conference, one of those regional summits where startups pitch to panels and audiences full of hungry founders and curious investors. I'd been invited to give a keynote on failure of all things. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was halfway through a story about losing everything, about the nights I couldn't afford dinner and the days I questioned my own sanity. When I saw her, she was near the back of the auditorium, tucked between a row of business school students and a startup team in matching polos. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more conservative than I remembered. She didn't look away when I saw her. She just stared. I didn't skip a beat. I kept speaking, my voice steady, eyes sweeping the crowd, but my heart was pacing. Not because I was shaken, because I felt nothing. She was just another face in the crowd, no different than the dozens of others who listened as I recounted a time when I was broken. After the talk, people gathered to shake hands, take photos, ask questions. She didn't approach me. I noticed her leave quietly while I was in conversation with a young founder asking for mentorship. I didn't follow her. I didn't even check to see where she went. She had stepped into my world for a moment, but it wasn't hers anymore, and it never would be again. That night, I reflected on how full my life had become. My company had just passed a revenue milestone I once thought was unreachable. I had a team that respected me, a relationship built on mutual growth, not dependency. I had peace. Not the kind that comes when everything's perfect, but the kind that endures even when it's not. And I understood something else too. She had to leave for me to become this version of myself. Her absence had cleared space for resilience. Her betrayal had stripped away illusion. Her silence had forced me to listen to my own voice. I didn't hate her for it, but I didn't thank her either. Some people leave, others stay. The important thing is who you become in their absence. Later that week, I got a letter. Handwritten, no return address. I recognized her handwriting instantly. Inside, a simple message. "I saw you speak. You were incredible. I'm sorry." That was all. No questions, no requests, no closure disguised as reconciliation. Just one final note. I read it once, then I placed it in the drawer where I keep old receipts, proof of a transaction long completed. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with a quiet realization that the person you were then no longer fits the life you're living now. It's been 3 years since she left me. 3 years since I stood in that dim apartment, broke and alone, reading the note that told me I wasn't worth staying for. 3 years since I felt like someone else had control over my future. Now, I wake up each day in a home I built, running a company that carries my name. I mentor people who are standing in the same place I once stood, full of doubt, fear, and silent ambition. I tell them the truth. It hurts. It will test everything you believe about yourself. But if you keep going, the people who once doubted you will watch you become the person they never saw coming. I don't tell them about her, not unless they ask. And even then, I don't tell it with bitterness. I tell it like I'd talk about a road I once took, a wrong turn that ended up being the way forward after all. Mia and I are still together, still building building something that doesn't need grand gestures to feel real. She understands that I'm not trying to rewrite the past, I'm just making peace with it, and that peace is everything. There are moments, of course, where memory slips in uninvited. A smell, a song, a street we once walked down. But now, it doesn't bring pain, it brings perspective. I can look at the past like a distant city, once familiar, no longer home. Sometimes I wonder if she ever truly understood why I never wrote back, why I never called. But that wonder is fleeting, like a leaf caught in a breeze, gone before it settles. The truth is, she made her choice, and I made mine. I chose to move forward, to forgive, quietly and privately, not for her, but for me, to build something she'd never be a part of, not out of spite, but because it was meant for the version of me she never waited to see. And most of all, I chose to write this story not with vengeance, but with clarity. So if you're listening and you've ever been left behind, know this: the pain doesn't define you. The rejection doesn't diminish you. The silence isn't the end of the story. It's the moment you start writing your own. I was left behind when I had nothing, and now that I have everything, I don't need anyone to validate it.